I have to do something special here because it's Joe Arico's birthday today. And here he is spending his birthday for the cause at PitchCon. Joe, happy birthday.
Nick, thank you so much. I appreciate you asking me to be on this. It's an honor. I watched PitchCon videos before I got in the industry to try and get some advice and get some different guidance on things. So it's really cool to be a part of it. I really appreciate you asking me here.
Oh, absolutely. It was fantastic meeting you in First Pitch, Arizona, and the invite to your podcast was wonderful as well. And we have the two Nates. Who is the great one, though? I don't know.
We
Well,
got to figure
actually,
that out.
no, it's
Good
pretty easy. It's
points.
Kosher because
Good
he's got
point.
the hat. He's got the hat.
I got the merch.
Sorry, Schwartz. It's over before it began.
I had no shot.
Nate Schwartz, Nate Kosher, so much. Thank you so much for being here for PitchCon. But everybody here, Joe, start with you. Tell everybody where they can find you.
Well, you can see there on the screen. You guys can hit me up over on Twitter at Joe Orico99. Nothing too crazy there. Pretty much just my name. You guys can find me at sportsethos.com. You guys can find my podcast, which is Fantasy MLB Today, wherever you get your podcast. And I should probably say, because it just happened right there, I had some electrical problems, so there might be a chance that my light may flicker once or twice. There may be a ghost-like effect here while we're on. So apologies there in advance. But yeah, Fantasy MLB Today is the podcast. All the written work at sportsethos.com. We're putting together a draft guide right now, so be on the lookout for that. All major sports coverages. We got a ton of stuff going on. You guys got to check it out yourself. Sportsethos.com.
Nice, awesome. Nate Kosher, tell us about yourself.
Yes, thanks, Nick. So I've recently joined Pitcher List. Very excited to be here. Just actually had my first article published yesterday, and so I'm just pumped to be part of this community. Been a long time fantasy player, baseball fan, and so it's just really cool what we're doing here, and excited to be here.
Yeah, well, it's great having you, Nate. And
Thank you.
Schwartz.
Yeah, so this is just kind of past year one at PL for me. Writing mostly kind of going deep stuff, primarily talking about pitchers and left-handed pitchers, as I am a left-handed pitcher nut in that regard. And yeah, I've kind of like Joe, I've watched PitchCon in years past. I'm very excited to be here and be a part of the stream.
Awesome. For some reason, by the way, your volume is going way up and way down. I just unplug it and probably put it back in. But anyway, I'm going to get out of here. Joe, take it away.
All right. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I really appreciate Nick asked me to be on this panel. I'm going to be leading you guys through this a little bit and guiding you along as kind of the host-like figure here. We're going to be talking about players that you can target past pick 300 in your drafts. What I'm doing is looking at draft champions because there are so many different formats going on. Specifically, the Gladiator kind of messed up ADPs in terms of how you can use it in your actual draft. So we're looking at draft champions. I'm looking from January onward. And we're going to be talking about players that we think are going to be worth taking a shot on past pick 300. So we're going to start with Nate, and we're going to specify here. It'll be Nate K and Nate S because we're on with two different Nates. Nate Schwartz, why don't you give us your first pick here past pick 300 that we should be looking at?
So yeah, my first player past pick 300 is Alex Kirilloff, who currently has a 455 ADP. He's had a bit of a unique last 2 years. He was the number 16 overall prospect entering 2021. Fangraphs graded him out as a 60 future value on his hit tool, his game power, and his raw power. And many considered him in 2021 to be a dark horse candidate for the AL Rookie of the Year. He didn't break camp with the team in 2021. He bounced back and forth, then went on the IL with a sprained right wrist, which has kind of plagued him since. He got surgery on it in late 2021 and then had wrist issues again in 2022 before finally going down with more wrist surgery late 2022. He mentioned 2 weeks ago that he was taking painless swings in preparation for spring training and should be good to go. And it seems like, at least according to Roster Resource, that he should be slotting in as the Twins starting first baseman come opening day. He really tore up, even while hurt last year, he really tore up minor league pitching in 157 AAA plate appearances. He had a 359, 465, 641 slash line, which is good for an absurd 192 WRC plus. And ATC has him projected for a 110 WRC plus coming into this year and 436 plate appearances. So it seems like he's going to get the playing time, and he's shown that he can kind of keep it up even if he isn't at 100%. I really like his batted ball quality. He had a 12.8 barrel rate in 2021. Well, it did drop in 2022. I do think that might have been due to the wrist. He has shown that he can hit the ball hard and put it in good places. And then finally, in terms of his plate discipline, he dropped his O-swing percent, which is his chase rate, from 38% to 33% in 2022, and started making more contact in the zone while overall swinging less. I think with a good bill of health and full playing time, he should be able to be an awesome kind of outfielder first baseman for many teams this late in the draft.
All right, that's our first player we're going to be looking at, Alex Kirilloff. Nate K, who is your first player that you're looking at past pick 300 this year?
Yeah, so let's stick with the Twins. I'm in Minnesota myself, so I'm going to talk about Max Kepler, another Minnesota Twin. So he's an interesting guy. A few years back, it looked like he was going to be a future star and even one of the Twins' main pieces, but he really struggled lately, especially last year. So if we go back to 2019, he had 36 home runs, 90 RBIs, great defense in the outfield. And I think the Twins were banking on, hey, this guy's going to be something. Just recently, it's sort of broke that the Yankees have shown interest in him and the Twins have been shopping him. And so he's a left-hander. So if he moves to Yankee Stadium, obviously that'd be a better environment for him. And with the skills being there in the past, if he gets a fresh start, I think he could be sneaky past 300.
Yeah, absolutely. He is another one to take a look at here. I don't have a Minnesota Twin, so I am not going to be talking about one of those, but I'm going to talk about somebody who was formerly of my hometown Toronto Blue Jays. Very sad that he is no longer a member of the team. He's going just after pick 300 in these drafts. We're looking at, and again, since January 1st, I'm looking at that ADP and draft champions. We're talking about Ross Stripling. He's going at pick 303 on average, and I was a huge fan of what he did in Toronto. Now, he wasn't always as good as he was last season, but last year he was 10-4. Obviously, wins are kind of not really need to look at that so much for pitching, but he gave you 10 wins. He also gave you a save, which was crazy in terms of his value. He had a 3.01 ERA, and overall, he was one of the most valuable players that the Blue Jays had. Now he's going to an organization that is known for revitalizing pitching careers. We've seen it with Kevin Gausman. We saw it with Alex Cobb. We've seen it with Alex Wood. We've seen it with a number of different players over the years. Carlos Rodon, even as recently as last season. And we're getting a guy who seems to kind of have figured things out. You know, even if he just stayed in Toronto, I would have been kind of in on him at this price. But considering he's going to San Francisco, I just love what they do with pitching overall. And I think going past pick 300 here, he's just after the threshold, and there's a chance that he does pop into that top 300 by the time that main event season rolls around and we're really kicking off drafts. But as of right now, outside of the top 300, there's not really a pitcher that I'd like as much as Ross Stripling. Nate Schwartz, we got another one from you. Anybody in particular you want to talk about here?
Yeah, so my first pitcher that I like is Alex Wood, with currently a 492 ADP and the 146th pitcher off the board, which, when you think about it, makes sense for a guy who had a 5.10 ERA last year. But you go just a little bit under the hood, and I think a lot of people have seen this. He had a 376 FIP, a 341 xFIP, and a 345 SIERA, kind of saying that the underlying numbers really, expected him to be a lot better, but he never really turned it around across all of 2022. And a lot of people think that might there's something weird going on. And I was kind of looking a little bit deeper into this, and he gave up a decent amount of hard contact at about league average 27% hard contact rate and a 362 xWOBA on contact, which is, a little bit below average, but it's not anything really necessarily bad. It's not great, but nothing that necessarily indicates a 5.10 ERA. But I think it might actually be, which I think can maybe turn around in 2023, is his sinker. In 2022, he threw it 49% of the time in the upper third of the zone, while the average starting pitcher put a sinker there just 29% of the time. Obviously, a sinker is usually a pitch that you keep lower in the zone for the most part, and it doesn't have a great vertical approach angle on it either. He has a little bit of a funky delivery, and it grades on the VAA scale for sinkers as about a 30 out of 80. It also doesn't have great spin on it, so I think it might just be a pitch that players were able to kind of tee up. And I also think part of it might be a lot of luck. He had a really good strikeout minus walk rate at 18.2%, which makes me have a little hope that he can keep it together in 2023. And if he does perform as the underlying stats suggested at this ADP, I think a lot of people will be saying, how did we not like pick this up? It seemed very clear as day that he was going to figure it out this year.
Yeah, Alex Wood, I am totally lockstep with you there. The pitching indicators were quite a bit better than the ERA. He only stranded 64% of base runners. There's a lot of things that didn't go his way last season, but he's definitely going to be a value in these drafts heading into this season for sure. Nate K, who is next up for you on this list?
Yeah, so we're talking about the Giants. I guess I'm staying on the theme of just whatever team you guys discuss that I'll discuss. But this is a pitcher as well, moved from the A's to the Giants, Sean Manaea. And so sort of what you're saying, Joe, the Giants pedigree with, taking pitchers and turning them around. They've had great success in recent years. And he was pretty bad last year. His ERA was above 6. But I think, once again, when you're this late in the draft, you're looking at who has had flashes of success in the past in new environments. And so I think he could bounce back this year in that environment at Oracle Park. You have a well-known pitcher's park. You have a good pitching staff. And I was looking at the depth chart. Actually, I was going to ask you, Joe, if you know what Stripling was listed, because right now Manaea is listed at 6th. But I would expect things could shift around. I mean, he'll get a chance.
I'm just pulling up roster resource here. Let's see. Computers give me a little bit of grief here. It's loading. Bear with me for a second. Fantastic radio here. Apologies, everybody. It is. Wow, my Wi-Fi is really giving me a lot of grief. I'm not sure off the top of my head. I would have thought they would both be in the top 5, though. Just thinking about it. I can't think of 5 guys that they would be starting over Manaea, but there could be somebody that's maybe escaped me at this point, but I feel like he should be in that top 5 here. Maybe one of you guys could try and pull up roster resources.
Yeah, let's see if we can get it.
Is giving me quite a bit of grief. Apologies there, but we'll circle back to that one. The next guy I want to talk about is Michael Brantley. And I think that he's somebody where, we're looking at last year as being maybe the start of where his value is going to be non-existent for fantasy purposes. But we've pushed him down quite a bit in drafts. He's going at pick 355. And he's still in a ridiculously good lineup where he's projected to be batting either first or second. And it's a little bit strange depending on how they end up doing their lineup. We know that Houston can be a little bit weird with the righty-lefty stuff. Brantley might bat second. I think that he probably will. And he's still somebody who can return, a 300 batting average, 7 to 10 home runs, just a smattering of counting stats. And he's really, really not expensive, especially in your 5 outfielder leagues. He is somebody that you should be taking a look at. In that lineup, the counting stats are probably not going to be, great just because of Brantley himself. He doesn't run very much anymore, but you're still probably going to be banking yourself like 120 runs and RBIs put together. If you look at the projections, Steamer has him for 10 homers, 63 runs, 51 RBIs, and a 281 average. I think that's fairly conservative. I think you could maybe not blow past them, but definitely return a positive investment there, considering he's going past pick 350. Webb, Cobb, Manaea, Stripling, and Wood, according to the chat here. Wood slated for 5th. Van saying forgot the Wi-Fi.
Okay.
Funny guy. But I think that they all should be in the rotation there. Those 5 guys, Webb, Cobb, Manaea, Stripling, and Wood, seems fairly solidified, I think. I don't know if that there's someone that's really going to challenge, but we'll have to see. There are some health concerns in that rotation as well with quite a few guys there. But Nate Schwartz, we are back to you. Who is your next target here post pick 300?
So before that, I do like that we have targeted the entire back half of the Giants rotation.
Your audio's cutting out a little bit there.
Oh no! Go to Nate K real quick.
Sure, you can still hear me, Joe.
Nate, why don't you, Nate K? Why don't you give us your next pick here?
Sure. So I'm going to talk about staying in California, but different team with the Padres. And so my next guy I'd like to discuss, Robert Suarez. And so technically he was a rookie last year, older. He's 31 years old. It looks like he's around pick 420, but this is something I'm looking at with Josh Hader. So we know last year he struggled. Obviously, he was probably the top closer in baseball for the prior 2 years. And so Suarez would be someone to target in a Solds league, saves and holds. He was the Padres' primary setup guy last year. I think he'd be he's going to stay in that role this year. And if Hader does have any issues, he's going to be the closer of the future. I believe Hader's contract is up after this year, and that the Padres signed him in the offseason, Suarez, that is, to be the closer of the future. So they're thinking down the road. He had a 2.27 ERA last year. I expect if you have holds in your league, he'd be a great guy to pick up.
Yeah, I'm with you there. If there is a hold league, for sure, I think he's a target. I think with Josh Hader, there was concerns we've talked about. I know the community's talked about it as a whole over the last little while. He had dealt with personal problems last year. His wife had pregnancy complications. He was traded mid-season. So I'm willing to give him a bit of
tough stuff.
Yeah, I'm willing to give him a bit of a mulligan, but for sure Suarez would be the fallback option if he does falter. I don't think Hader would be removed from the role necessarily right away. They'll probably give him a bit, fairly long leash, but Suarez is definitely somebody to keep an eye on for sure. Nate Schwartz, we got the audio figured out. I think we'll take a look and see.
Can you guys hear me all right?
Yeah, we're good there. We're good.
Perfect. So the guy I wanted to talk about is Brendan Donovan, who has a 394 ADP currently. He surprised a lot of people last year, finishing third in the NL Rookie of the Year voting and actually won a Gold Glove. While I realize that's not fantasy relevant, I think it is key for him getting consistent playing time. His best tool is his on-base ability. He hit for 281 with a 394 OBP, especially in OBP leagues. I think he's a pretty easy target, and I'm guessing in those leagues he might be actually going above a 300 ADP, but he's late and he has really good on-base skills. He has a 92 percentile whiff rate, a 90 percentile chase rate, and a 93% walk rate, which is, really elite skills and shows that, he's not going to get out at the plate. You're going to have to make him put the ball in play. He only swings 38% of the time and makes about 84 percent contact on his swings. And that is well above the 75% league average. He only has, one of the reasons he's this low is that he has only a 3.1% barrel rate and only hit 5 homers last year. ATC has him projected for 7 homers and 4 stolen bases, so not much utility there, but especially in a really thin second and third base pool. He has both eligibilities and can definitely be a good player to fill those gaps on off days for your starters and get you some average and OBP.
Yeah, I was talking about him on my own show. Might have been today or yesterday. He's versatile. He can play a bunch of different positions, and he's slotted in at Roster Resource. He's projected about 5th in that lineup. So, the counting stats might not be amazing considering his profile, but probably not going to be terrible. Bad behind Goldschmidt and Arenado, sandwiched around Tyler O'Neill and whoever is Lars Nootbaar. Like it's a decent little lineup for him to be in. So I agree there. Brendan Donovan is somebody you should be keeping an eye on. The next guy I want to mention is Harold Ramirez, and we're getting to the point with my own guys because I was going by ADP, starting with the guys just past 300 and moving beyond. These are probably going to be deeper league guys at this point. If you're in a 10 or a 12-team league, I don't think you should be taking Harold Ramirez. But if you're looking, in a DC, you're looking for at-bats later on in your draft, he's going at pick 385, and he's somebody who could realistically hit close to 300. He hit 300 last year. He gives you, some stats a little bit across the board. He's not really excelling in any one area. The batting average is probably his best category. But he gives you a few home runs. He's going to give you, decent amount of counting stats, probably 120-ish runs and RBIs put together, and steal a couple of bases for you. He's just somebody who does a little bit of everything. First base and outfield eligible on the NFBC. He's somebody, and again, not somebody to look at in shallower leagues, but once you're getting down and you're looking for players to just fill in playing time, somebody to keep on your bench, hoping for, in case there's an injury later on down the season, he's somebody where I'd be very confident sticking him into your lineup, assuming that somebody else gets hurt. Not somebody you're, probably not going to be in your opening day lineup. Maybe in a 5 outfielder league, he's like the 5th outfielder you take. But I think once you get into this range, it really does thin out in terms of people who provide a little bit of value across the board, specifically with batting average. He's definitely somebody that I would keep an eye on here. going on pick 400 at this point. Let's keep the order the way that we've gone this last time around. Nate K, let's go back to you. Who's your next target here?
Sure. Yes. And I was just going to say, Ramirez is like one of those guys. He won't hurt you. You might not get much from him, but he's not going to hurt you in a negative way. So
yeah,
I'm going to go with another pitcher for my next guy, someone who's been pretty well known in the past, Carlos Carrasco. A few years ago when he was on the Indians, pretty solid pitcher. He also dealt with some personal health issues. Obviously, he was a cancer survivor, but now he's fully healthy. He's in New York. The Mets are going to be a good team. So if you're looking for wins, quality starts, he's going to get run support. Last year in 2022, he's 15-7 with a 3.97 ERA. The Mets have a lot of good arms, but I've just kind of always liked Carrasco. And so he's at pick 303. I may have said that. His name just pops out at me as someone I'd like to pick up in drafts.
Yeah, absolutely. He's somebody to keep an eye on in that rotation. Like you said, 15 wins is not out of the blue or not out of the realm of possibility.
Right.
Somebody that you should definitely be keeping an eye on as well. Like all the guys we mentioned here, giving away some late round targets if you guys are in your drafts. These are the guys that we are going to be, you're going to be reading articles closer to the year written by probably all three of us, late round targets. Get those targets a little bit early if you're listening here. And of course, just a reminder, take a look at the donation page. Look at all the prizes that Nick and everybody has donated, everybody's put together. Think about throwing a few dollars towards the ALS Association. There could not be a more worthy cause here. But let's kick it back to Nate Schwartz. Is there anybody else that I'm sure there are people, Jesus. Anybody else that you want to mention here to us past pick 300 that you're interested in?
Yeah, so another one I got is pitcher Zach Eflin, who currently has a 373 ADP. I was surprised to find when he signed a 3-year, $40 million deal with the Rays, that was their biggest free agent deal in franchise history, which is just wild. I know they've given out some bigger extensions. Wander Franco, I think, signed something north of $200 million or $300 million, but still to give an FA a deal 3 years, $40 million, and that be their biggest is kind of crazy. So part of this at this ADP might be trying to read a little bit between the lines with the Rays and what they're doing. If they signed Eflin, it's clear that they saw something. He threw just 75 innings in 2022, split between 13 starts and 7 relief appearances, resulting in a 4.04 ERA, with the ERA or estimators all coming in around the 3.7 mark. He has a 6-pitch mix, which is kind of unique, but mostly sticks to 4 pitches, which are the sinker, curve, four-seam, and cutter, and has a slider and changeup in his bag when needed. The sinker has a 31.5% CSW rate, which is a really solid figure, and is his main pitch for getting called strikes. And kind of one of his problems is that it does get hit for a decent amount of average. His best pitch is his curve, which has an absurd 40% chase rate and overall 20% swinging strike rate, which is 14th best of curveballs thrown a minimum of 150 times in 2022. And one of the really unique things about his pitch mix is that he actually has a fastball, while only thrown at 92 or 93 miles an hour as a whiff pitch. It's a 13.9 swinging strike rate and a 31% O swing, which are both well above average, and he doesn't really throw the fastball in the zone too often. And these pitches together, I think maybe why he's so low on draft boards, is that they don't exactly get him Ks, but they get him really good hard contact prevention. And I think since he can prevent contact, pretty well, I think the Rays might be able to tinker a little bit with him and get more Ks. And he's going to throw a bunch of innings for them, so I have a good feeling that he might be able a little more value than the 373 ADP he currently has.
Yeah, I mean, I know it's overused, Rays gonna Ray, but the Rays take players that shouldn't do very well, and they end up doing incredible things. I'm not saying he's going to be a Cy Young winner by any means, but he's definitely somebody that you should be keeping an eye on. He's shown flashes in the past, and a team like Tampa, when they acquire somebody, it's something to take a look at for sure. So definitely a very strong pick there. My next target is going to be Kendall Graveman of the Chicago White Sox. Now, this is more a pick out of the horrible situation that's happened with Liam Hendriks. He's going to be missing an undetermined amount of time coming back from cancer. We, of course, wish him all the best. And, it's the terrible thing we have to talk about, though, is who's going to replace him for fantasy purposes. And I do think that it is going to be Kendall Graveman. That's what Roster Resource is telling us. He is somebody in that pen who has experience closing. We've seen it with Seattle. We saw it a little bit last year with Chicago. And I think that he is the guy that they are likely to turn to. At this point in your draft, you're really not going to be getting any full-time closers. Like, they're pretty much gone. His price is still adjusting, and it's going up quite a bit. His minimum pick is up to 208 over the last few weeks, but the ADP is still at 318, so he still qualifies for this list. Definitely somebody that I would be keeping an eye on. Like, once you get to this point, he might be the only closer left. If you're drafting like right now, because the market will adjust and he will end up going inside the top 250 picks, I'm sure. But for right now, you got to be taking him in your DCs and anywhere really to lock down some saves for however long that Liam Hendriks is out for. We're not sure if that's going to be a few months, if it's going to be a month. Who knows how long it's going to be? But for the time being, Kendall Graveman should be a really strong candidate to get some saves there in Chicago. All right, back to Nate K. Who is your next target for us?
Yeah, so I haven't talked about younger prospect type guys yet, so I'm going to go there next. So I think my own strategy when you're late in the draft, you're either looking for those veterans who have had some success or young prospects that we all get excited about, right? And who may get playing time if they emerge. They might have one skill that you can really use that will help you this late. And so looking at these guys, Brett Beatty is someone that I'd be looking at later in the drafts. So this is a prospect pick. Once again, sort of a raw talent, not necessarily a clear path to playing time, but he was rated 70 in power when he's in the minor leagues. Right now he's listed as number 2 third base prospect. And last year in AAA, let me have his stats here. AAA and AA, he slashed 315, 410, 533, 19 homers and 22 doubles. That's in 95 games. Eduardo Escobar right now is still the third baseman in New York, but he's on the decline. I think, he doesn't have much left in the tank. So I just like looking at these exciting young guys, hoping they're going to emerge as the next big thing. And so that's another guy I'd look at.
Yeah, always good to keep an eye on the young studs. He is definitely somebody who could potentially break out this year, depending on the role that he's given. I just want to address something in the chat real quick. Josh Rojas' name came up, Ha-Seong Kim. They're both going inside the top 300, but definitely two players to be keeping an eye on, specifically Josh Rojas. I'm fairly bullish on him heading into the season. Yeah. Back to Nate Schwartz. Who's next up for you?
I will stick with the Rays this time with Isak Paredes, who currently has a 429 ADP, so really deep in drafts. He came over to the Rays in the Austin Meadows deal last year after being a top prospect for the Tigers, but not really cracking their roster. He had just hit 205, 304, 435 with 20 homers this year and had a pretty good 17.6% K rate and 11% walk rate. One of the biggest problems that kind of held him back in the average category is that he had just a 195 BABIP and not great batted ball qualities. What sticks out is his 22% ideal plate appearance rate, which is how often he has a barrel, solid contact, or a flare burner. And that ranked 258th out of 277 hitters with at least 300 plate appearances. So I don't think many people are going to be targeting him, but he did post a 323 WOBA, which is above league average, and a 361 xWOBA, suggesting that he did underperform a little bit. And that might be due to his ability to hit the ball in the air a lot, which isn't great with kind of his low exit velos on average. But he did last year post a 110 max EV, which is 4 miles an hour harder than anything he did with the Tigers, which gives me hope that he's, prospect development is kind of different across the board and that he's figuring stuff out. And last year, he played great defense at second and third and a little bit at short. And as the Rays kind of rotate guys around, he should get 300, 400 plate appearances. And he could be a great guy, again, in OBP leagues to get you walks, but also he'll crack a surprising amount of homers. And I do think that average is going to come up to 230, 240. Projection systems are kind of saying that. And I kind of think so too.
I didn't realize until you mentioned it that BABIP was 195. That's shockingly bad. That's not going to repeat. You'd think it's almost impossible to repeat that low. 20 homers in 110 games, walking 11.5% of the time. There's a lot to like there for sure. And especially, we mentioned it earlier. The Rays are the Rays. They do magical, weird things with players. If they acquired him, we should probably be keeping an eye on that. Next guy I want to talk about, excuse me there. Next guy I want to talk about is Jeimer Candelario for the Washington Nationals. Now, I'm not huge on him, but I definitely think there is definitely going to be some value. The only thing that's going to hold him back, I think, is probably this lineup because it's pretty bad. No question about it. There's not much around him. But we're talking about a guy who is just a couple of years removed. In fact, just really a year removed from leading baseball in doubles. He still has quite a bit of pop. Even last season, he had 13 home runs. A terrible ballpark that he's coming from in Comerica. Not that he's going to like a huge hitter-friendly ballpark, but definitely an upgrade. Not somebody that we should just be ignoring. His batting average last year was terrible. Typically, he's been more like a 240, 250 hitter. He was 217 last season. There's definitely room for a bounce back here. Again, not somebody that I'm going out of my way to draft like ahead of ADP, but he's not going until close to pick 400. It's at bats at a terrible position in third base. Definitely somebody that I'd be keeping an eye on here. He is probably going to be going up a little bit. I've heard some chatter, different people talking on Twitter and on podcasts about him as a late round target. So that price may get more expensive, but definitely somebody who has more potential than what we have just seen this past year and, what you would expect based on his ADP heading into next year as well. Nate K, back to you. Who is your next pick here after pick 300?
Yes. So this is a very deep cut. He's listed at 485 here on my list, but that's James Paxton. So if you remember him, Joe, you're in Canada, so maybe Big Maple. You're familiar with him,
Yeah.
But he's now with the Red Sox. Roster Resource has him slotted in at the number 4 pitcher. He's struggled all last year. He's trying to slowly recover, and the team kept saying, "Oh, he's going to be back. He's working his way back. He's working his way back." And then finally, it's one of those guys like, "Well, actually, no, he's not going to make it." And I believe he aggravated an injury, then they just shut him down. But someone who's been solid in the past. The question with him is he healthy? From what I'm reading, it sounds like he's going to be, but a guy can eat up some innings, a big, strong guy. And I would think the Red Sox are going to be better this year. Who knows, getting rid of all their good players. They were pretty bad last year, but so maybe they'll bounce back. But Big Maple, someone to look at way late in a deep league.
Yeah, I agree. I am a big fan. Of course, I'm a little biased, like you mentioned, my fellow Canadian, but nonetheless, take a look at James Paxton once you're getting down deeper into your drafts for sure. Nate Schwartz, you're up next.
So I will take an even deeper cut on ADP with Alex Lange at 535. But I don't think that's going to stick as an ADP. When I started doing research for this panel last week, he was at, I think, 580. He's now at 535. For that, it's because he is slotted in on Roster Resource as the closer for the Tigers. And he's got a lot of great tools, and people are recognizing that and shooting up draft boards. So while you can, I think definitely take a shot at him. He was a solid reliever last year for the Tigers, had a 3.41 ERA, 30% K rate, but a little bit of a worrying 11% walk rate and 63 innings pitched. And one thing I do worry about with him is that he did blow all 4 save opportunities in 2022. I'm not sure how much that really comes into effect, but it is something to note that he didn't convert a single one. He throws a power curve half the time at 86 miles an hour, and it has an absurd 44% CSW rate and also a 44% chase rate. But like many pitches, he does struggle to throw it in the zone. His changeup, which is his other off-speed offering, is thrown in the zone just 16% of the time, which is really worrying. You really don't see any pitch often that low. But his main fastball is a sinker, which he only throws about a quarter of the time. And it's definitely the pitch that gets hit, as his changeup and curveball really don't get touched by hitters. And his changeup, again, which he only puts in the zone 16% of the time, it has a 25% swinging strike rate, which is about double the average swinging strike rate on a changeup, which is, crazy. And I think the tools and his pitch mix that he has really makes him an intriguing target for probably 15 to 20 saves this year. Um, I think just overall, there's not many guys. The Tigers have kind of phased a bunch of players out of their bullpen, so he can really take a step forward if he can throw a little bit more strikes in the zone.
If you filter like just the most recent drafts, he's going like top 250. So like the prices just keeps getting more and more expensive on him. Definitely somebody to keep an eye on, like we mentioned earlier with Graveman. Those guys that do have opportunities that pop up throughout the offseason, heading into spring training, where you don't expect them in your early drafts to be getting saves, they are going to shoot up the boards come February, March, and even into early April, depending on how much you want to push it. I think season starts March 30th this year, I think. But regardless, definitely somebody to keep an eye on. Saves really, really start to thin out there. Now, the next guy I want to talk about here is Brandon Pfaadt. I believe that's how you pronounce it. I know some people say Fat. It's Pfaadt. He's not quite yet with the Arizona Diamondbacks. He's a AAA. I do expect him to come up at some point this year. Now, they're not exactly lacking for young stud arms, but from what I have heard from the people in the prospect community who know a lot more than I do, because I will preface it by saying dynasty and prospects are not my specialty, but especially in talking with Chris Clegg, who was on here earlier, he was on my pod recently as well. He's really big on him, and he thinks that he could potentially, make some noise. I've heard him talked about, not just by Chris, but by a lot of people, as maybe, if there's going to be a Spencer Strider kind of breakout this year, this is the guy who could do it. We saw him striking out absurd amount of batters throughout the minor leagues. He flew through the minor league system, and he's still, I think, he just turned 24 years old. He's still very young, hasn't quite cracked the bigs yet, but I think if he does end up on the roster, he's somebody to take a look at. And if you're drafting right now, he's going just a hair inside of the top 400, 397 in the last 17 drafts. And I think that he's somebody where you should really be targeting in your DCs. Now, if you're in like a shallower league, like I mentioned earlier, 10 or a 12 team league, I'm not sure that you're going to need to draft him right off the bat, but there are certain leagues, especially like certain leagues on Yahoo that I play in, where you have an NA position, NA slot on your roster, where you can have one or two minor league players on the roster. And I think that he is definitely somebody to consider in that situation. Not that you should take a zero if you don't have that spot and just, sit and wait for him to be called up, because it might be a little while. But he's definitely somebody that you should be thinking about come this range in your draft, because the upside is through the roof with him, and we could see him sooner rather than later. All right, Nate Kosher, we're back to you. Who is your next pick?
Yeah, so I'm going to go with another young stud, and I'm not sure if I'm saying his first name correctly. Esteury Ruiz. I don't know if I'm saying that first name right, but actually on pitcherlist.com just recently, it was a story about the top Oakland A's prospects. He came in at number 3. And what I really like about him is this guy has insane speed. So second base, outfield eligibility, got a taste of the just last year. But listen to these minor league stats. Last year between AA and AAA, he stole 85 bases, had a 332 average, 114 runs, 16 home runs, and he's graded out at 80 speed. So there's not many guys like that. If you think back to like that one-dimensional, that is like Billy Hamilton, a few years ago, guys like that have like one elite skill. Obviously, stolen bases shouldn't be as scarce as they have been in the past, but one of those younger guys who are young talent in the draft, and if he gets a chance, he's going to get stolen bases. It's a slam dunk. So if he gets the opportunity, if he's a full-time player, I do think he's just going to pick up stolen bases so easily.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, in terms of stolen bases as a whole, this has been a hot topic. It's been something that's been discussed ever since they announced that there was going to be changes. For me personally, and maybe I'll get your guys' take before we move on here, I think that stolen bases are not going to, we're not going to see somebody who didn't steal at all just suddenly become a 10 stolen base guy. I think that it'll be the guys who are already stealing end up, the guys who have 20 steals end up with 25 or 24. The 15s become 20s. The 10s become 15s. I don't know that it's going to be guys who are zeros are becoming 5, 7, 10 steal guys. I'm not sure the general landscape overall is going to change that much. Like the amount of steals in a category may end up changing, like how many particular roto points you need to reach, or how many steals you need to reach 10 roto points might change that number. But the percentage of total stolen bases, I don't know that it's going to change that much. What are your thoughts here, Nate? Nate K, I guess we'll start with you because it was your point to begin with.
Sure. Yeah, I know it's been a hot point of contention, and it seems like everyone's talking about it. This year before we kick off the season, I think you're probably right, because if someone hasn't stolen bases before, if they're not skilled or talented, they're not going to all of a sudden now be running crazy, and taking off every chance they get. It will probably be more subtle, but just because everyone's talking about it, I think we are expecting, well, you're going to be able to get stolen bases with anyone. But I think it's a good point. It probably won't be as drastic as people are saying it's going to be. It's just everyone's talking about it right now, so it seems like that. But Ruiz would be a guy, it doesn't matter what the rules are. I would bank on him to just grab those stolen bases.
Yeah, I mean, he showed it throughout the minor league level. Like last year when he was in AAA, 28 games with San Diego's AAA team, 37 with Milwaukee's, 48 steals in those 65 games in AAA. Like, it's one of those things you look at the screen and you're not sure you're actually reading it right if there's something wrong there. That's what he did, unless there's something bugging with Fangraphs. That's what he did, and I believe it with how fast he is. So he is definitely somebody to consider, and not necessarily a one category guy. Like, he has shown bursts of power in the past. Now that ballpark may end up killing that, but he could still end up 7 to 10 home runs. ATC has him for 7, Steamer has him for 9. So he may not just be your Billy Hamilton kind of steal specialist. He may actually be a bit more well-rounded than we are expecting. Nate Schwartz, do you have any thoughts on the stolen base thing in general before we move on to your next pick?
Yeah, nothing that really you guys haven't said. I think it's going to boost a lot of the 5 to 10 steal guys to kind of 12 to 15 range. I think a lot of teams kind of have a threshold for the time you need to have from first to second in order to go, and all of a sudden that got a little bit bigger. So I think teams are going to send guys just a little bit more, but I'm not sure it's really going to change a bunch of low steal guys into interesting targets. And I'm really not sure if there's really only so many times you can run realistically. So I'm not really sure how often, unless you're literally like Ricky Henderson, you can take off on an everyday basis.
Yeah. I don't think we're going to see
Ricky runs when Ricky wants to run.
Sorry, say again?
I just said Ricky runs when Ricky wants to run.
Yeah, exactly. That's why he is the king, of course. Nate Schwartz, though, back to you for your next target here past pick 300.
My next guy is Steven Matz, who currently has a 456 ADP. I think a lot of people forgot about him after last year. He signed a 4-year deal with the Cardinals and was injured a lot of last year, throwing just 48 innings pitched. And those innings really weren't great by any stretch of the imagination. He had a 5.25 ERA. But he was one of the only Cardinal pitchers somehow that didn't get a nice boost from the defense, which I found really interesting. The underlying ERA estimators kind of suggest that, yeah, he was a bit unlucky at a 378 FIP and a 322 SIERA. And in a small sample size, he had a 26% K rate and a 4% walk rate, which are really solid figures. And I think that's something that could be built upon in 2023. Part of why he might have been a little bit unlucky is he's a really strong fly ball pitcher. But over the course of the year, Busch Stadium, where the Cardinals play, had the 26th lowest home run park factor, suggesting that a lot of those fly balls will get just kind of swatted down by the air. And I think that he has a really good chance in a full season where, 48 innings, one start can kind of derail the whole stat line, that he can really come to prove that he's a underrated good pitcher. And especially with the Cardinals, they seem to turn kind of average looking guys into decent ERAs. His sinker is really weird. He's a fly ball pitcher, and that sinker as his main pitch has just a 28% ground ball rate, which is really unique as it's thrown mostly up in the zone. I mean, two of the guys I've looked at, him and Alex Wood, both throw sinkers high in the zone, which I think is a really interesting kind of archetype. And it had a 14% swinging strike rate, which is a fantastic value for the pitch, and it overall had a 35% CSW. Again, a really strong number for a main offering. And again, I think given a full season with the Cardinals, Matz can be a sub-4 ERA guy.
Absolutely. I agree with you there. When he was in Toronto, I was really hoping we would re-sign him because he was starting to, show things down the stretch that maybe he could, be a sub-4 ERA guy on the regular. And I do think that St. Louis is an organization that could definitely pull that off with him. Next guy I wanted to talk about here, a name from old who had fantasy value for quite a while, who's kind of been not so great these last couple of years, but kind of turned it around a little bit, is Carlos Santana. He's with Pittsburgh now, so that will probably kill any kind of team context value. I mean, maybe it's not going to be quite as bad as I'm expecting, but he's not exactly in that Braves lineup or the St. Louis lineup where you can count on the counting stats around him. It's more so you're going to be looking for power numbers, and I think that we can still see the power. He's been historically a 20 to 35 home run guy in his career. In these last two seasons, 19 and 19, the projections are generally saying they're going to be a couple less, between 15 and 17. The thing that I'm really looking for with Carlos Santana is a benefit from the lack of shifts. He's somebody that we've seen a lot of articles, a lot of talk about him as somebody who is probably one of the most affected people by the shift. And now that we are going to see less of that, there's a chance that we see his batting average, which in recent years has been horrendous, return back to somewhere close to what we saw in his early career. Like his last three seasons, we're looking at 199, 214, and 202. And BABIPs have been 212, 227, and 209. And he's generally going to run fairly low BABIPs to begin with. He's a fairly slow individual. I mean, he has 48 steals in his entire career, which goes back to 2010. He's not exactly, burning you around the bases there, which does contribute to that. But the lack of the shift, I really think we could see that, these last 3 years, about a 200 batting average, 210, call it, return to somewhere close to like a 225 to 240 kind of range while giving you decent home run totals. He's not somebody that, again, a common theme here once we're getting to this range, not somebody to be targeting in your shallow drafts, but in your deeper drafts and your DCs. He's going past pick 400, and he's getting more expensive recently because he was going past pick 500. But he's going to play. He's going to be in the middle of that lineup, and I think that he should be, at least positive or at least a neutral return on investment here at pick 427. I think that it's a fairly decent bargain for what he's shown he is capable of doing, specifically if you're in an on-base percentage format, because the on-base percentage for him,
Yeah.
I mean, he walks as much as he strikes out, and then you don't need to say how attractive that is. That's obviously, an incredible thing that he does every single year of his career. He's walking at least 13% of the time, and last year was no different. 14% walk rate, 17% strikeout rate. Even with the 202 batting average, he had a 316 OBP. So specifically in those formats, keep an eye, but in general, definitely somebody that I am going to be interested in for this next coming season. All right, Nate Kosher, we're back to you. Who is your next pick here?
Yes. So I have one more guy I want to discuss. Another San Francisco Giants pitcher, and that's Taylor Rogers. Now they already have Tyler Rogers, so to not to confuse the situation, Taylor Rogers, is the new brother on the Giants. Tyler was already there, and so Taylor last year he did struggle. He'd been used as the closer in San Diego at the beginning of the year. Before that, he has been used as a primary closer before. If you look back to 2019. He saved 30 games for the Twins in 2019. Last year, once again, I mentioned his struggles, but he still had 31 saves. So the talent is there. He's not going to be the primary closer in San Francisco. Obviously, Duvall is pretty electric, and that's his spot. But we know Gabe Kapler's done weird things in the bullpen before, and I play a lot of Solds leagues, so I look for these guys that can get holds and some saves, and I would expect he's a chance at 12 to 15 saves over the course of the year, but primarily used as a setup man. And who knows, maybe now that he's with his brother, there's some good synergy there, and maybe they'll have good years.
It wouldn't shock me to see him get maybe not the majority of the save chances, but they might go lefties. I forget the term, like the fire hose or whatever it is. I might be using the wrong term, but they'll use him against lefty dominant or predominantly lefty lineups. When it gets to the ninth inning, they'll use Duvall against righties. Yep. I think that could be possible. Now, Duvall's still projected for the lion's share of the saves, but there was talk throughout the season. Fireman Spores in the chat corrected me there. I do think that Duvall is probably going to get the majority of them, but at the same time, there was chatter throughout the offseason that they were looking to have somebody else kind of supplement him there. They didn't seem to be the most confident heading into the season. If they're not confident in December, then God knows how confident they're going to be once it gets to April, May, June, down the stretch. I don't think that it hurts at all to get yourself Rogers, specifically, in those DCs. If you take Duvall earlier, then pair him with Rogers. Then you're getting
Right.
those saves one way or the other. If Duvall does lose the job, then you have him. If they're doing some kind of platoon, then it kind of sucks on a week-to-week basis. You don't really know who's going to get the opportunities. But I don't think it's crazy to suggest that by the end of the season, there's a chance that Rogers may end up with more saves than Duvall as of right now.
It's possible. I don't, on paper, he doesn't look as attractive, obviously, but
No.
it's someone you could pick up late.
I don't expect it, but it wouldn't shock me at all at the same time. Nate Schwartz, we're back to you. Anybody else that you want to mention here?
Yeah, so the last guy I want to mention is Aaron Savale, who currently has a 455 ADP. What kind of jumped out to me, I actually saw this on, I think it's Ryan Bloomfield's Bloom boards, that he had a velo bump and improvement on his strikeout minus walk ratio in the second half of 2022. His fastball went from 90.8 miles an hour to 91.6, which isn't a sizable bump, but it is still a bump nonetheless. And the strikeouts minus walks percentage improved from 14% to not ridiculous, but a very good 23%, which is really interesting and makes him an intriguing candidate. Currently slotted as the number 3 Guardians pitcher. He was a solid pitcher for Cleveland in 2021. Ended the season with some finger injuries, and then 2022, while he still almost cracked 100 innings, was riddled with injuries. So he didn't really find time to get into form and get into a groove as a pitcher. But he is kind of across the board like the almost generic Guardians pitcher. Nothing really kind of jumps out at him, yet he's still able to limit hard contact and succeed as a pitcher. The biggest difference from the first half to the second half is that he bumped up his cutter usage and was able to get more out of the zone swings on all of his pitches, which is really key for a command guy like him. And I think really late in drafts, he's a little bit of a Toby where it's really not interesting, but as a free pick, he could put up some really good ratios.
Yeah, Guardians are another team. We mentioned the Giants earlier. We mentioned San Francisco. We mentioned the Giants and St. Louis as organizations that really know what they're doing with pitching. Cleveland is exactly the same. You have to trust them a little bit more. Even in particular players, you don't maybe see something right away. The organization sees something. Tampa as well. You really have to pay attention there. There's one more guy that I wanted to talk about here as we were approaching the top of the hour, but the last guy that I wanted to mention was Matt Carpenter, and I think that he's really interesting for a number of reasons. Now, last season was stupid. It was ridiculous. 47 games, he had 15 homers. He was outrageously good. It was awful that he got hurt because he was winning people leagues, and maybe he did contribute to winning new leagues, even though he did get hurt. Probably not in head-to-head, but in your roto formats, you picked him up. He was fantastic. Now, this season, he's kind of being forgotten about. 458 is his ADP. We're looking again just since Christmas or just since New Year's. The minimum pick is 373. The max is 519. There's still a rather big range on him. But he's somebody where, like I said, you don't have to invest a lot. He is in the middle of a stupidly good lineup, and it doesn't even feature, if you look on Roster Resource, the lineup already looks incredibly good and doesn't even feature Tatis in it yet. He's somebody where he's only utility eligible right now, but he is likely to gain at least one position throughout the season. He's somebody who can play a number of different spots. He slotted in as the left fielder, and now there might be some platooning there, lefty-righty splits. I'm not sure how they're going to work it out exactly, but I wouldn't worry about having to have him strictly in the utility slot for the whole season. I think that he will gain at least one position, and there's a chance the way he can play the field that he might gain multiple. So while I wouldn't be counting on that specifically, the production alone that you can expect in that lineup should be pretty damn good. And if you look at the projections, even 15 home runs, about 100 runs and RBIs put together, especially in OBP leagues, like we mentioned with Santana, he's going to walk 12, 13% of the time. That's going to be very valuable, even though he's projected to have a 220 average, a 325 on base percentage, according to ATC. So he's still somebody who could have a lot of value. If you look at just that stat line, just the projected stat line, you could probably go and put him, probably inside the top 400 at least. I think that he's being undervalued by at least 3 or 4 rounds. And I really think all things coming together for him, he could be a really huge value. Now, there is also the fact that he's 37 years old. Maybe he starts slowing down a little bit, but we didn't see that at all last year. Granted, the years prior were not so good, the last couple of seasons, but he really bounced back. I'm willing to buy in at the price that he might have found something in New York that he'd be able to carry over. So Matt Carpenter, past pick 450. Every single day of the week, I'm going to be taking a chance on him. Guys, is there anybody else that we have not mentioned yet from your list?
I think we're good.
Oh,
It's
Hey, guys.
perfect timing.
Hi.
perfect.
What's going on? Okay, so I want to hear this really quickly. I think I got it before. I just want to make sure I got it right. Nate Schwartz, your favorite pitcher past 300.
Alex Wood.
Right. Okay. Nate Kosher.
I would probably have to go Robert Suarez.
Okay. And Arico.
Probably Stripling.
Okay. Stripling wins. Sorry, I'm just kidding. What do I know? I hope. Honestly, there's a thing about Alex Wood that concerns me is we had this idea of the Giants being this elite defense in 2021, and then we entered last year being like, "Oh, the Giants, such a good situation. They got the wall on right, and it's gonna be so good." And then the defense was horrible. And there's something to be said about that's kind of why Cobb and Wood were much worse. But yeah, Wood should not be like, what was it, 5.10 ERA, something like that?
Yeah, it was a 5.10 ERA, and all of the
on the dot?
estimators were at like a 3.
Yes. I mean, velocity went up on the fastball. So it is kind of interesting. Maybe you can get that changeup back. I'm probably not going to touch it in 12 teamers because I'm just going to wait and see. I think San Francisco, actually, this is the most important part that I always forget, and I got to memorize them, is the early schedule of each of these teams. Like, if you're in a 12 teamer, you gotta know what they are. It's the Yankees for 3, and then Chicago for 3. Chicago White Sox. So if Wood gets one of those games against the Yankees, I'm like,
in New York.
Yeah, I don't want to do that.
It's a rough start for the Giants.
I don't know. NFBC is kind of different because like you won't be able to get them after and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But anyway, Joe, happy birthday.
Thank you.
I'm not going to make these guys sing it right now. We're all in different places. It's going to be out of tune and all delayed. But thank you so much for taking the time with this. Kosher and Schwartz, great to see you guys.
Yes,
and,
thank you.
I'll see you guys, of course, on the Discord, but looking forward to more of your work as it comes out in this preseason as well. But yeah, thanks for being here at PitchCon. And, one more time, Joe, tell everybody what you do.
I am the head of the baseball department at Sports Ethos. We're pulling together our draft guide right now. I'm doing podcasts every single day. I'm going back to last March now. I'm actually closing in on a year. Fantasy MLB Today. You guys can check that out wherever you get your podcast. I'm going to be bugging all 3 of you guys to come on at some point soon. So make sure you check your messages. And yeah, all the written work at sportsethos.com. I really appreciate you having me though, Nick. Great honor to be here with you.
Of course. Schwartz.
Yeah, so you can find me writing for Pitcher List. Find me in the Discord, and then on Twitter at _Nate Schwartz. And it was just an honor to be here. It was a great hour. Glad to talk about players. Have a good time, and happy birthday, Joe.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And Kosher.
Yes, so I'm at Nathaniel Kosher on Twitter. It's my full name, even though I do go by Nate typically. And you can find me on Pitcher List. So happy to be here. Thanks, Nick, for the opportunity.
Oh, of course. By the way, I like that you got the silver brim.
Yeah, that's I was pretty happy when this showed up. I'm not gonna lie.
I need to get some merch on my name.
Kind of the Oakland Raider look.
If you pre-order PL Pro, you get this. All right. I mean, that's not for you guys. You understand. But everybody,
right.
But anyway, thank you guys so much for being part of this and helping us raise the money for the ALS Association. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.
See ya.
All right. We are going to continue. Oh, my God. What's going on?